All right. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? They put me in the session after lunch, so I hope I don't see too many nodding heads. So I'll try to keep you guys alive in here. Just a couple of housekeeping items, I guess, if you will. Just kind of go over a quick agenda. Now, there are going to be a couple of slides that you guys may see that just look a little weird. Any of those slides are the slides I did not do, all right? So keep that in mind. So we have a bunch of acronyms on here. So SOAR, anybody familiar with what SOAR stands for? Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response is what that is. SOAL, which you're going to see some weird slides there on that one. I think some of the titles are pretty funny. But what is SOAL? That's Security Operations Events Lifecycle. Okay, so those are some things that we want to talk about. The overall agenda, though, for my discussion today is I really want to take you guys through what the common problem is within the Security Operations Center and how we go through leveraging the security operations events lifecycle to produce or craft up a playbook so that we can automate certain tasks. All right, so about myself just a little bit, not that I like to talk about myself, but one thing that I think is relevant is my Splunk journey started as a security or a SOC analyst, if you will, supporting one of the DoD agencies. And within there, we use Splunk as our SIEM solution. We were using the core platform. We didn't have the actual enterprise security solution at that time. There are a bunch of repetitive tasks that I actually performed as a SOC analyst, and I really wish we would have had Phantom because my job would have been a lot easier, okay? So I'm going to talk about a couple of those things. But the key things that I want you guys to take away from the discussion today is, one, the pillars of Splunk, just understanding really what differentiates our platform as a whole. And then overall, understanding really some of the things I just talked about in regards to what that security operations events lifecycle looks like, and then how we would go about crafting up a specific playbook, which a playbook is a term that we use on the Splunk Phantom side, which is ultimately the automation side, like the actual workflow on which that you're trying to automate, all right? And then just understanding those differences between the impact. But it's really the SOAR versus the SOAL, and we'll get a little bit more into that. So kind of just starting off, every problem is a data problem. And the four words underneath that is really what we're going to focus on right now. With Splunk, one of the things that we identified is machine data is being generated by everything under the sun, right? If your Tesla you want to go left and your Tesla goes right, that's a problem. Machine data is being generated from it. We need to be able to research and troubleshoot why that happened, if you will. Things are coming from all over the place. Drones. I saw this on the slide. I was going to tell my drone story. It may not be very funny to you guys, but it pissed me off. So I bought a drone, but I live in Ashburn, and where I live very close to the Dulles Airport. Well, I was unaware that I was in very close to a no-fly zone, which basically all of DC is a no-fly zone. So I basically bought this very nice drone, and I couldn't even fly it. So, so you would send it up, and it would just go, you're in a no-fly zone, and it would automatically land it because it used the geofence from my phone. So, but anyway, I told you guys wouldn't find it funny, but it made me upset. So I was just telling you about it because I saw drones there. But anyway, so, a lot of disparate sources where data is coming from. What Splunk is doing is allowing you to gather all of that data and ultimately be able to ask questions of that data from one centralized location. From a data perspective, right now, there's over 160 zettabytes of data. I couldn't even fathom or conceptualize what that would even really look like. And then we're talking about 10 times of that data will, by 2025, it'll be 10 times that. And I'm not even going to try to figure out, if we're changing from zettabytes, I don't even know what's next, truthfully. All right, so a little bit more here about just the platform itself. So those four words that I talked about: investigate, monitor, analyze, and act. The reason why Splunk is very unique is because you can do all 4 of these components within our platform. Now, you would be leveraging multiple tools. A lot of it may come just from our core or Splunk Enterprise. Some of it may come from integrations with apps that we have or premium solutions. And then our most recent acquisition, which is Splunk Phantom, which is the driver for today's discussion, okay? The investigate side, if we have a particular scenario where a SOC analyst or a hunter wants to search for something, you can go directly into the Splunk platform and we can look for specific indicators, or we can look for a specific file hash that's tied to a particular host. We can run queries, or what we call our search processing language, and filter for those types of results. The next thing is being able to monitor. So that's where it comes in. We've identified a specific type of activity that we would like to detect, and we put that in as a rule, if you will, or a config rule or an alert or a report, and then that's generated or reported, okay? So we're monitoring for a specific activity. The next is analyze, having the ability to pull back analytics on that information. And then most importantly is being able to act. So I'll tell you some of my stories. Hopefully some of them you guys will find a little funnier than the drone story next go around. But here's our security portfolio, all right? And kind of what I was mentioning is a lot of things you guys can perform from that Splunk Enterprise side of things. Splunk Enterprise is the core platform. That's where we can ingest and take in all these disparate sources of data. From there, you have the ability, you can search on that data, you can be alerted to it, you can visualize it and provide reports off of that. The next tier is being able to start pulling in analytics, where we can have, more descriptive dashboards that are available to you, more like trend or predictive type analysis, leveraging machine learning, leveraging artificial intelligence, because those are all the big buzzwords that people like to use now. So we have Splunk Security Essentials, which is a free app that's within our Splunk base, or kind of like our app store, if you will. And then we have Enterprise Security. That's our SIEM solution, okay? So when you're looking at, if anybody, do we have any like SOC managers or SOC directors, anybody in the room? All right, so if you're evaluating any SIEMs, this would be what you would map up against a QRadar, for example. Splunk User Behavior Analytics, that's going to be our unsupervised machine learning solution. That's going to help you be able to be more privy to insider threats, for example, more anomalous behaviors. Now, you can detect a lot of anomalous activity from within our platform as a whole. What the Splunk User Behavior Analytics is going to do for you, though, is it's going to provide you with unsupervised machine learning. So it's going to help you baseline your environment and help you find these anomalous behaviors, and then more importantly, map and stitch all of those things to threats, okay? And those threats are going to be the high fidelity alerts that we will want our SOC analysts to look at, all right? And then we have our machine learning toolkit. That's one way you can leverage Python's computing scientific libraries for machine learning. They're embedded within this particular app, and then we can start to classify or use specific models to do some of that trend analysis, the predictive analysis, grouping certain activities within particular models, like clustering models, things that I don't mess around with, but I'll leave that to the machine learning guys. And then the last part is the operation piece, which is the act, being able to identify something specifically that I put in, a particular parameter, that parameter gets hit, I review it, and then it moves forward in that workflow, and it's an automated task for us. So just looking at data capabilities in the SOC. So just taking those 4 layers that we just looked at and kind of breaking them out, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what steps in terms of the workflow this would fall under. So, I mentioned the threat hunting for investigate. I want to basically be able to search for something, do a deep dive forensic investigation. I want to monitor for something. A big buzz now is previously on the Splunk side, I used to support our aerospace and defense customers, so all of the federal system integrators. So was that last year when DFARS was, they had the deadline for DFARS. So that was the big thing. Splunk has the ability to help from a compliance standpoint. So when you're monitoring for specific security controls, these are data sources that you already have in your environment. We send them in to Splunk, and then we're looking for specific parameters like how many failed logins have been hit on a particular user. Maybe we care about privileged accesses, things that have changed in regards to user groups, people being added or removed from security groups. So these are all things that Splunk has the ability to provide you monitoring capabilities on. And actually, to speak to from a GDIT perspective, I know one of my counterparts is currently GDIT supports one of the civilian agencies that Splunk is obviously has a customer with, and they have been using Splunk or standardized on Splunk in order to do all of their security baseline alerting, right? So one example, this is going to be another thing I can share from a previous job where I wish I had Splunk. So one example that they're using it for is previously, pre-Splunk, they were actually taking, using Pivot within their Microsoft Excel to outline or highlight all of the new vulnerabilities that they would have, and then they were just looking for the deltas and any new vulnerabilities for systems in an Excel spreadsheet. So they were doing that like weekly. I actually used to do the same exact thing. I was a part of a risk management group. We ran scans across the whole entire organization. We took all the scan results and actually pushed them into an Excel spreadsheet. And then my team and the SOC guys, we used to fight over whose results were right. So it's funny to me where Splunk could have taken all of this data in, and now what they're essentially doing is they have an alert that's set up that essentially triggers when there's a new vulnerability that's detected. So obviously freeing up a lot more time for whoever the individual is that was looking at the Excel spreadsheets every week for that. From an analyzed perspective, incident workflows or incident response, those are things that are built into the SIEM. So that's what you're going to start seeing differently about our platform once you start getting into premium solutions. Fraud is a big piece. I know on our enterprise or commercial side, fraud use cases are things that we've heavily been having a lot of success with helping our customers. And then the ACT, so the SOC automation, this is pretty much the SOAR. SOC orchestration, automation, and response. Obviously, we had to make it difficult and put it in a different order for you there. So some of the challenges with SOCs, and I'm sure you can relate to this, resources. Definitely a shortage in security professionals. Every now and then I kind of just throw something out there just to see, and if I put my resume out or just post it, I get responses like crazy, specifically even in this area. So definitely a shortage of security professionals. A lot of point products too, and that's another unique thing about Splunk is being able to do some sort of consolidation. We don't really do the rip and replace messaging a lot, but there are certain tools that do overlap, and Splunk can take on some of that functionality. Because we have all of these point products that we're bringing into the SOC, it's just generating more external alarms that someone has to review. And the more alarms, and I'll be truthful with you, I've been in environments where we would get so many alerts, I knew some of the alerts by heart. Like I knew what the source, the destination IP was, I knew why it was triggering, but people don't have time to actually go through and filter some of these alerts out. So they're not firing. So just imagine, being in a situation where you're just seeing hundreds and hundreds of alerts. I mean, there's just no way someone's going to review those, or just depending on the human to review those. And then most importantly, kind of all of the goal is obviously to decrease cost. And more importantly, we want to minimize the amount of time someone is looking or reviewing an alert, okay? So this is the $6 million SOC, if you will. So here are all those point products that I was just talking about, right? Firewall, I mean, everybody, you should have a firewall. If you don't have a firewall, that's probably, a bad start to begin with there. So we have IDS, IPS, your endpoint, WAF, advanced malware, forensic. I mean, the list goes on. That's a pretty short list, truthfully. Then all of that data is going to push into some centralized or aggregating platform for you. So, I really want to just wipe all that stuff out and just put Splunk there. And then to provide all the analytics and then the decision making. But most importantly, what we want to talk about now is where can we automate some of these processes? So currently today, all of that data is coming in, and there are users and under that context or the decision-making stage that are performing all of these duties. So the goal will ultimately be to automate everything up to its time to act or perform a task. And some of the tasks we would just allow to push all the way through. Some of the coordination may require some human intervention. So the goal is to be able to have certain tasks hit a SOC analyst. That SOC analyst that can now review all of the information that's available to them, make a decision, and then push forward and act at that point. I read an article about, it was probably a year ago, I think Dark Reading has something on SOC analysts, and it was talking about how like 1 in 3 SOC analysts are always looking for a new job. And the thing that I found interesting about it was, in our heads, we would think the tier 1 analysts are the ones that are always disappointed or want to find a new job. And what was interesting was like 70% of tier 1 analysts, according to this, whatever the survey was, said that they were happy in their position. So there were actually the tier 2 and tier 3 analysts that were not happy in the position. And the reason for that are because of all the repetitive tasks they're doing all day. The goal is for these guys to do things that are more intellectually challenging, and they want to learn and be better at their job, but you can't do that when there are like 5 zillion alerts triggering every time, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. I think a lot of tier 1 analysts in general think that automation is to replace their job. And I try to explain to a lot of people from a security perspective, it's actually to help you. So I was a person that was taking quarantine zip files. Our organization basically quarantined every email that had a zip file in it. And we had to review it, release it, send a customer a ticket, and kind of the whole nine, send them an email, and then we would close the ticket. So that whole process could have been automated, gave me all the results. I could have pressed a button, and that was probably hours of my day that I was spending doing that. All right. Another thing I was upset about without having Phantom there. So what is SOL? Security Operations Event Lifecycle, right? So we talk about all these trigger words like incident response plans. I've never been a SOC manager, but I know these are common things that you have to deal with, right? Or a director. You're trying to put these plans into place. And sometimes you're putting the cart before the horse, truthfully, because you may not even be at that point or mature enough to actually be able to implement a full-blown incident response plan. So to kind of counteract that, we could leverage the security operations events lifecycle. So these are stages that I think are applicable in any SOC. So we're talking about the ingestion piece or the alerting, right? External validation, adding some context to the alert when it triggers, whether or not we're doing like a lookup, file reputation, URL reputation, things of that nature. Internal hunting, leveraging, what we get from our context and that alert, and then going and hunting within our enterprise or within the enclave and identifying whether or not that file hash is sitting on one of our systems, as an example. Monitoring. Now we identify this is something that's bad or malicious, and we want to be alerted to it continuously. And then from there, it triggers a whole line of other actions as well, like change, running those jobs, and then providing those notifications. So we'll get a little bit more in depth here in regards to certain actions that you would see with those different stages. So think of this now from a Phantom perspective, all right? So these are actions, or there's another term that we use a lot with Phantom, which are artifacts, which could be, indicator as an example. It just might be a series of information that you pull back from a particular technology. But anyhow, these are types of data sources that we would leverage at each stage. And then these are the types of actions, and these actions are specific actions that can be performed from a Phantom perspective, all right? So being able to pull or push all of your events or data from whatever platform you're using that's aggregating all the information that you have, then being able to do that external validation, so going outside of your actual tool to another tool to pull back and gather information, and then basically having that go and hunt throughout your entire environment and identify whether or not those indicators sit or stand within on a host or maybe on a server. And then having that change or monitoring. So being able to add a firewall rule as opposed to having a ticket that has to be created. You send it to the firewall guy. The firewall guy is eating lunch. He's not going to do it until later. And all while possibly maybe there's traffic that's going in and out, right? Endpoint alerts where you can have it hit or quarantine a host as an example. And then more importantly, kind of the running the job. So taking all of that information, maybe plopping it into a sandbox, for example, gathering new indicators that you maybe want to add to a ticket to report or maybe to a team that basically is going to add those indicators into your threat intel moving forward. So the goal of Splunk, or the path that we're moving forward with, our initiative, is to be able to take, and these aren't in any particular order, so don't feel like you're kind of following the maze to the end there. But the goal is for us to take any workflow and allow for you to be able to integrate that workflow from one place, all right? So our platform as a whole is gonna allow for you to be able to ingest the data, be able to do all of your detection, be able to automate. It's all gonna be from one platform. All while you can still leverage being able to pull in different content, having integrations with other technologies on the outside, using machine learning that's built into it, artificial intelligence. So these are all things that are part of the platform and really just trying to consolidate that down into one uniform location as opposed to you having to use multiple tools throughout your enterprise. So are you a sore loser? See, this is one of those ones. So differences. So I kind of did a poll on how many people knew what SOAR meant. So definitely going to spend a little bit of time here. One of the slides I didn't make. So security orchestration. So the way to think about security orchestration is basically that is a coordination of like a machine-based coordination of tasks that are being performed that essentially does integrations throughout your infrastructure, okay? Throughout a complex infrastructure. The security automation would be an example of something like, for example, I was doing where I was reviewing a file, a malicious, potentially suspicious file, doing the analysis, and just having that one security action be automated. And then the security response is really kind of meshing when you have a coordination of more policy-based, if you will. So you know there's a workflow that you want to follow, and you have the security side of the security automation take place, as well as that orchestration across different technologies within your environment. All of that stuff maybe stops at a particular analyst. I review it, and then I basically kind of accept or deny whether or not I wanted to move forward in the workflow that we've created. So that's going to be more the security response. So the goal of all of this, obviously, is not for me as an analyst to not be spending so much time reviewing alerts versus reviewing things that have been detected that are known bad activities within my environment, as opposed to just going through false positives. So this is really a breakdown of what Phantom has to offer. So I've kind of now moved into kind of the Splunk Phantom side. So this is the offering of what you're going to get from that platform. So one thing that you have is the orchestration part, right? Then you have the collaboration. One thing I really like about the platform is there's what we call mission control within Splunk Phantom. And within that, all the analysts can go, they can see the alerts. But let's say, for example, I take ownership over a specific alert, for example, and I'm working on it, but I need maybe, maybe you have a CERT team, so I need to kind of engage them to look at something a bit deeper for me. So I can actually collaborate with them from within the interface. There's like a basically real-time chat there. I can add notes, and they have access to see the same things that I'm seeing. Or I could just say, hey, Bill, can you take a quick look at that? And I can assign a task, for example, to that particular user. He could review it and send that information back to me as an example. We can collaborate all within this one container, on that specific alert that we're working on, okay? So I think that that's definitely a nice value add from the platform, which is something that you can't natively do inside of Splunk. The event management side of things, which is kind of going back to the events that I was just talking about as they're coming in. Case management, which is nice. So you have all the alerts that are filing in. Let's say 80% of alerts you see are probably false positives. That 20% of alerts that come in that actually become an incident, we can create a case. And now when you create that case, there are templates that we can follow. So for example, if you want to follow like the incident response kind of guidelines that NIST provides, there's a template that's embedded in there. Maybe there's a workflow that you want to follow internally. So you can create that template or that workflow, and it's going to give you checkboxes. Hey, you received this alert. These are all of the necessary steps that you need to basically complete before we close out this ticket. And those are all there. And then that goes back to the collaboration, because some of those steps may require another team or another business unit to get involved, so we can still do that collaboration piece from within the event, as well as using a case. And we can demote or promote events for cases. The reporting and metrics, that side of things I think is a little light on the Phantom side, but then that's where Splunk comes in. So see, we have kind of that, we're complementing each other, if you will. So the reporting and the metrics is definitely something Splunk does well, and we can push this data from Phantom back into Splunk and then get that reporting back. But there are some actually pretty nice reports, especially from an executive level, that you can pull out of Phantom. And then the automation piece, which is the part that I cared the most about, just those repetitive tasks that analysts are doing on a day in, day out basis that we can just help us respond faster to incidents, reduce the amount of time we're spending on incidents. If it's something that's definitely impacting the organization from a monetary standpoint, it's very important to get that communication out, close the gap, and make sure we resolve or mitigate that issue so it's not costing you, quite a bit of money. So really quickly here, I just want to kind of just go through how we would start leveraging those steps or stages and figuring out how we're going to craft the playbook. So obviously we discover an issue, we scope out that issue, figure out what those requirements are, and then we start monitoring for it. We monitor for it, we get alerted, all right? Once we are alerted to it, we need to respond to it. Now, the goal is for us to minimize the amount of time that we're spending on responding to an alert. So how do we do that? We automate it. Once we automate it, we're sharing it out for collaboration amongst the groups, and then we need to measure how long that took. Can it be improved? Can that process get better? How will we improve that process? Are there steps that we need to remove, as an example? So we learn from that, and then we transform or make whatever necessary modifications, and then that makes that repeatable process that we can continue to implement within the organization. So we kind of want to take this this path, if you will, to create those playbooks. So here's some use cases that you could leverage, and this based off of persona. So you'll see security analyst up at the top, hunter, and then the CISO there. So I'll leave this up for a sec here just to kind of get an idea. Definitely not just limited to this list, but these are some of the common ones that we see within organizations or with our customers. I'm going to pick on the suspicious email, of course, because I've mentioned it quite a bit. So think of me as an analyst in this particular case. I have a suspicious email that comes in. So this is kind of the first step there. Step one is I'm basically reviewing the body and the header information, but you see the individual there. So here I am. I have to look at this information. Now I'm looking in Exchange to identify who received this particular email. Now I'm hunting for the file using our endpoint response. And again, these are all steps that as an analyst, typically if you take an alert that has come in, you're working that from start to end. I'm not going to do steps 1 and 2 and then say, hey, Paul, I'm about to take a break. Can you do steps 3 through 7? So I have to stick with it. So just look at even all these things require you to maybe log in and just search for a particular value. it takes time, right? So this, even if this took me 5 minutes to do each stage, I mean, that's 35 minutes right there. So let's take a look at it from a Phantom perspective. So same steps. Now the email comes in at ingest. Now the files are parsed out. It parses out the URLs that are within the body of the email headers. It then takes all of those values or that data and puts them in their respective places that are going to give us back the data that we need, right? Or give us back those artifacts. So now I'm sending the file and the URL to the VirusTotal. I'm taking that file. It's getting detonated in FireEye into the sandbox. I'm now hunting for the file to see if it's been identified in the environment anywhere. I'm hunting the URL, but all of this is automated. Okay, so now Phantom has brought all of this information back to me. So I'm feeling good because that 35 minutes now just happened in 1 minute, and now I can review all of this information as an analyst, and then I can make the assessment or choose. So it will basically prompt or task an analyst and say, hey, this is all of the information. How would you like to proceed? And now I can make that decision. All right. And then last, I just wanted to kind of give you guys an example of different types of actions that could take place by those stages that we discussed earlier. So the ingest, being able to investigate, if you want to contain something, notify, document. These are the types of actions that you can automate from within Phantom and leveraging Phantom. And they're different integrations, obviously, per the types of technologies that you have in your environment that are built out in Phantom. We have over 200 integrations that are already there. So a lot of these are apps. If you're using Palo Alto, for example, from firewalls, that app will have specific actions that are available to leverage. And these are the key takeaways, just, understanding that security operations events lifecycle that you can apply within your environment. And then that helps you basically craft out the playbook for your orchestration and automation. And I think the better you understand that lifecycle, the better you can craft out those playbooks. So I guess we'll open it up for Q&A if you guys have any questions. That's a great question. So the apps are essentially making our API integrations. So two sides of it. Splunk as a whole has Splunkbase, and then Phantom has its own app store, if you will. So that's my phantom.us. So all of the integrations I'm speaking of here, these actions will be on the Phantom side, and then those are apps you would go and download, and per the app, it'll tell you which API integrations are available. And then this is built heavily on Python. So let's say you're using some homegrown tool, but you guys have a REST API integration available. Then you can build your own app and then still be able to create the types of actions from within your homegrown tool. Yes, sir.
Are you only tied to the integrations in the app? And I thought these were only security. Is there a plan or to IT related?
Great question. See, he's looking out for me. It's one of my fellow Splunkers. I had that in my notes, and I didn't even tell you guys about it. So Phantom has heavily been with security orchestration. One of the things that we're currently working on, or what's on our roadmap, is to be able to have these automations and orchestration from an IT side of things, from IT ops. So, a big thing right now is like containers. You're using Docker, Kubernetes, all that sort of stuff. You want to be able to monitor what's going on in the cloud from a metric or troubleshooting standpoint. The same workflows that I'm speaking of here, we would apply to more of a knock, if you will, from an IT perspective. So good question. So yes, they're coming. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think my time is done here. I thank you. Appreciate you guys for listening and staying awake.